Joan stuff in the hall. As we always say, she was the biggest supporter. She started to bring it up. Bill, you went with, hello.
Hi, Dad. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Nice to see you.
Good.
I did.
Hi, Jackie Hart and Bill Dickinson.
Bill Dickinson.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
We haven't met, not in a long. It's been too long. I keep thinking I'm gonna go get some Morning Glory mustard to come over for coffee and reminisce.
Okay, you have chairs set up and mics on the chair. It's going to be a brief introduction. Just
Well, that's how she was explaining to the lady. She was talking about the pearl. Yeah.
So, Ellen, how are you doing? Hi, Joan.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
hello.
Hello.
I think you're going to have to come sit up front.
Unless you want to be That's the way I look. That's the way I look.
Everyone wants to sit with me. Again, welcome to Community Connections. Our program today is the Oak Knoll Social Work Team. So we have with us Sarah Neary, Kaylee Gilmore, and Allison Clark. Welcome. Come in. I'm Jackie Hart, and I'm on the Oak Knoll Community Connections committee, and also with us today on the committee, Bill Dickinson in the back. And Dick Cruz just walked in. Hi, Dick. Allison is the newest member of the team, but both Sarah and Kaylee have been here 5+ years, and they worked at Iowa City Hospice before coming to Oakville. So I will turn the program over to Sarah. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Wow, it's great to see such a big crowd. I wasn't expecting so many people to be interested in the social work role, but I'm glad to know that you are. And the way that we have this time together sort of scheduled, I'm gonna start and just read a little something that I wrote a couple years back about the social work role at Oak Knoll. And then I want to pass the microphone over to Allison. As our newest member, we are just having her here to introduce herself to you and to give you a little bit of information about her background. She's going to pass then things back to me, and then I will start to talk about the role that I play here at Oak Knoll as a social worker for the independent living residents and assisted living residents. And then I'll pass that the mic over to Kaylee, who is the social worker for Health Center, Short Stay Unit, and the law. So you can get an idea of the areas that we cover and the things that we do. So let me just start by reading to you, if you don't mind, this little blurb I wrote. What do social workers do? It takes many different kinds of people and skills to support and care for Oak Knoll residents. Nurses, administrators, activity directors, maintenance workers, dining and housekeeping staff all play a critical role in the quality of life of our residents. But what about social workers? What is their role in the lives of aging adults? Social workers are, first and foremost, advocates for the populations they serve. This means learning about the unique changes, challenges, strengths, and dynamics that go with the biopsychosocial process of aging. So at Oak Knoll, the social workers have specialized education in aging and end-of-life issues, including the impact of physical and cognitive changes on quality of life. They are trained to assess individuals using a perspective that is whole person-centered, strengths-based, and inclusive of environmental and social dynamics. Those are three perspectives that really differentiate social work from other mental health disciplines. So advocacy also includes representing the social work perspective with other staff members, residents, and the Iowa City community at large. It can include education or support around specific aspects of the aging process, such as adjustment issues, grief and loss, caregiver burden, and the impact of dementia. Social work's ethical values guide them in ensuring that residents are treated well, validated, and respected. Social work can be hard to define, so a couple of analogies have been used. One is that social workers are like the oil in a machine. The machine can function without them, but the oil helps all the parts work better together. I like that one. Social workers have also been described as wearing many hats. So one day I may have my resident advocate hat on. On other days I might be educating a family member or staff person. I may be helping maintenance move a resident or present to a group of residents about the transition process at Oak Knoll. Other hats that I like to wear include chair yoga instructor, so I also teach yoga here at Oak Knoll. I'm an artist and have been invited to show my work here at the 5th floor gallery. And I also enjoy the groups, the support groups that I facilitate. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of how social workers fit in the machine that is Oak Knoll. And I'm going to pass it over now to Allison now for her to just introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her background.
Hello, can you all hear me? Okay, great. So like Sarah said, my name is Allison and I'm a new social worker here. I look forward to getting to know each of you better individually, but for the moment, I'll just give you a little bit of my background. So I grew up in central Iowa in Cyclone Country, got wise, moved to Iowa City, and I've been here for almost 15 years now. I have a 25-year-old son who graduated from City High. I have a almost on the door a 5-year-old grandson who is just the best thing that's ever happened if you ask me. Before Oak Knoll, I worked with children with autism on the autism spectrum, doing early intervention. I became a sign language interpreter, so I have some fluency still. It's definitely a little rusty, but I spent some years as a sign language interpreter. I got a bachelor's in psychology and recently decided to go back to school for my MSW at the University of Iowa. So I'm here part-time, full-time student, staying busy, but that's the way I like it. I also think hobbies are very important, so I have an awful lot of those. And I have my outside hobbies like hiking and camping and snowshoeing. I might be the only person I know that gets excited about snow, but I do. A lot of bicycling. I also have my inside things like crafting, and I try to crochet, but it might be a lost cause. Yeah, so I have a lot of varied interests. My background is very varied also, and I think that's part of the reason that social work kept calling to me, because like Sarah said, social workers do a lot of different things, and so I'm excited to be here. I have found everyone very warm and welcoming, and I appreciate that so much. So thank you very much.
Yeah, give her a round of applause. So I am a stander when I talk, and so, you know, we're all just allowing ourselves the freedom to do whatever makes us most comfortable up here. And just so everybody knows that Allison will be somewhat of a floater. So, you know, there's lots of you, and thus far have only been 2 of us. And so we're really training Allison at every level of care, and she's been starting at the heart of Oak Knoll's care, which is in the health center with Kaylee. So we've started her there, and she's going to be branching out, working a little bit more in the assisted living areas and independent living areas, and then also having a clinic, a social work clinic over at Oak Knoll East. So, you know, as you can imagine, that is an incredible amount of learning, a big learning curve to take in all the just the major concrete tasks that social workers do, but then getting to know the individual residents and how to support them. So we are gonna give her lots of time and room and space to develop in her role, which was given to me when I started back in 2015. We had just opened Spring Street when I started here. I replaced Ann Drovat, who was the independent living social worker before me. And my role, as I said, I sort of cover the independent living apartment residents and assisted living apartment residents. So at those different, you know, it looks different at the different levels of care. So at the independent living level of care, which includes this main campus, one up, Oak Knoll East, you know, all the houses. So when I talk about independent living residents, I'm really including that entire population. I am here for independent residents as a resource. So in other words, I don't have a caseload of 300 people, you know, who I go and visit like maybe a more conventional type of social worker does. I really wait for you in some capacity to come to me with questions or issues or things, and then we kind of problem solve things together. So I hope that that is clear, because as independent residents, you're still very much in charge of your own life. You're still very much in charge of your own medical care and health decisions. But there comes a time when everybody needs a little bit of help and guidance, especially in the ways that social workers help, is really about resources, matching an individual's need with the resources that are available. And here at Oak Knoll, there's lots of internal resources available, and just getting to know those is a process. I mean, you know, how long do you have to be here before you understand all the different things you can take advantage of? I'm still learning about transportation options and things like that. So connecting you with internal Oak Knoll resources, but maybe needing a community-wide resources. You know, I've had people ask me for a referral to a mental health counselor, or, you know, consulting Stacy and I about, not that we would provide any particular name, but, you know, people who are saying, I have this new health issue, what do you think I should do about that? Who should I go to? What's the next steps? As I said earlier, you are always invited to come to me directly, whether you want to make a phone call and set up a time to meet, or, you know, we pass each other in the hall. But some of the other ways that I might come in contact with you is through reports from other staff members. So, you know, there's a lot of people that may interact with you on a much more frequent basis than I do, such as dining staff, or EVS, or, you know, maybe wellness. Maybe there's people that you see, you're gonna see those people a lot more than you see me. And so sometimes when somebody's physical or cognitive health is changing, I will get reports about that kind of thing, or just if something seems out of the ordinary, somebody who is usually very prompt for the ride to the grocery store, or someone who is usually very neatly put together, is looking a little less than, or a little unkempt. Somebody who used to keep their apartment really, really tidy, and now it looks a little messier. So those are times when the social worker, in partnership with the apartment nurse, might do a little bit more investigating in terms of, is there something going on? Do you have support in your life who can help you with that? And if not, what support can Oak Knoll provide, or what direction can we point you in order to get you that support? And so sometimes all of those things are put into motion so that you can stay in your independent apartment longer, you know. And it's amazing how some little teeny tiny tweaks really help. You know, I have a lot of people who the only thing they need help with is changing the sheets on their bed. Like, that is the one thing physically that is very, very difficult for them. Otherwise, they can do everything else. And so we connect them with At Home with Oak Knoll in order to help with that. So, you know, you can kind of fill in the blank with getting to the grocery store, or making a grocery list, or, you know, phone calls. I want to connect with my kids on FaceTime, but I don't know how, you know, technology, things like that. So, and especially as we've been through this COVID time, you know, we've had to adapt and get a little more comfortable and familiar with technology, and, you know, that's a learning curve too. So I don't claim to have all the answers or to know Oak Knoll like the back of my hand, even though I've been here 6 years now. But what I promise is that I'll figure it out with you, that together we'll kind of figure it out. Because a big part of, you know, person-centered care, and a big part of advocacy, is empowering the individual to, you know, have the autonomy to do it for themselves. So it's not, Oak Knoll's not set up to do things for you. We're set up to support you so you can do them for yourself. Does that make sense? And I know, you know, it's a population that highly values their independence, their sense of control, their sense of mastery over, their own destiny. In addition to some of, that kind of more nebulous type of tasks, I do some very concrete things. Like we have started, since Spring Street opened, we've started doing a pretty structured new resident orientation where, before residents move in, they come and meet a few of us. I'm one of the people that they meet, and I share just a very brief overview of how social work and the apartment nurse work together. They meet with technology to get an overview of, how cable and TV and computers work here at Oak Knoll. They might meet with transportation and get just a little overview of how that works. So we want people to come, even though we know that it takes a long time to kind of live into the resources and supports and amenities that are available at Oak Knoll. We want people to feel like they at least have a starting point. The other thing that I do is I facilitate 2 support groups. They each meet once a month. One is the caregiver support group for spouses who are caring for a loved one who has either a physical or a cognitive chronic illness. And I also facilitate the grief support group, so that's for people who have been through a loss of some kind. Mostly the people that come to that group have lost someone to death, the death of a spouse or a family member. But I would love to see that group expanded to where people maybe bring in their other losses that go with aging. I often say that I think getting older is like getting a postdoctorate in loss. I mean, you're always having to kind of let things go because your physical body doesn't work the way it used to. Maybe your cognition doesn't work the way it used to. So there's some letting go, losing abilities that go along with getting older, but there's also some resiliency there and positives to the process as well. So I encourage people to come not just for the loss of someone that they love through death. I encourage them to come for any other feeling of loss that they might be experiencing. And one of the losses that happens to everybody is moving from their private independent home to community living. So even just moving to Oak Knoll itself is in a way a loss. Of course you're leaving some things behind, but of course gaining a lot as well. So I'm here for all of those adjustments. And that's not to say I'm a therapist and can talk you through those kinds of harder depression or those kinds of things, anxious moments. When they become more of a chronic issue, then we would work to find you the kind of professional help that would be most useful to you. But I'm here to kind of brainstorm and troubleshoot just about anything. Another couple of concrete things that I do, Kaylee and I and Allison as well are both trained in facilitating conversations about advanced directives. So, we really encourage everybody at this age and stage to have powers of attorney identified for your healthcare decisions, for your financial decisions, even having conversations about end-of-life decisions such as CPR, such as intubation. I mean, we've all gotten a lot more familiar with these words as we've gone through COVID. And then the other thing, of course, is assisted living. Then I work very closely with Jacqueline Craig, who is the nurse coordinator for assisted living, and kind of bridge the gap there. So even though I just talked a long time about stuff that I do, probably the main piece of my role here is to coordinate and facilitate transitions from independent living to either assisted living or the health center. So, when it comes to a point where you need more support than you are getting in your current living situation, it's time to talk about a transition to a different level of care. And of course, that's why everyone moved to Oakdale, because all the levels of care are built into the system. You know when you come here, you don't ever have to make another move. But even then, even though, you know, I'm assuming everybody came into this place with that clear-eyed understanding, people still need a lot of education and support as they make the transition between levels of care. So can't imagine what it would be like if you were living in a, you know, an independent senior living facility and then had to move to a completely different assisted living, and then had to move to a completely different health center or 24-hour nursing care. I mean, it's hard enough when you're in the same building with staff that know you, with your loved one just upstairs, you know, being able to visit you. So that's a big part of my job, is to kind of help navigate that time, not only with residents, but with your family members. So that's one thing that we've discovered, is your children love you very much, and they're very invested in your well-being. And so sometimes it's not so much about me educating you, it's about me kind of communicating and educating your family about the Oakdale system. So that's kind of it for me in a nutshell. I will pass it along to Kaylee. So just a reminder, independent living is not a licensed healthcare provider. You know, this is just a bunch of really nice apartments where a bunch of really nice people live together with some amenities to support that independence. Assisted living and health center / loft / short stay unit are all licensed healthcare providers by the state of Iowa. So there's a set of rules that, you know, we have to follow for those different levels of care. So, and Kaylee will talk a little bit more about that.
All right. Hello. I'm Kaylee Gilmore. I have met many of you, become acquainted over the years, but there are many in this room that I haven't met. So I was born and raised in Northern California and moved out here to Iowa City about 15 years ago. I have 3 young kids, or youngish. 14-year-old is the oldest, and a 6-year-old is my youngest. So very busy with them. I look forward to time later when I can engage in some of the hobbies that I enjoy. So as Sarah said, I work in the health center and the short stay unit in the loft. I've made a list here. I often describe my role as a social worker as a utility player. It is very hard to define as compared to other disciplines. So a large part of what I do, like Sarah, is work with the transition team to help residents transition into the health center or loft as needed. I work very closely with family members and the individual resident, initially just to provide education about the level of care that they are needing, or that best serves them. I work, kind of coordinate a lot of the logistics with identifying the room that's available, figuring out the timeline for the move, and then a lot of support afterwards to the resident and the family members as they get to know this new environment. I provide a lot of information to help orient the individual and family system to the new level of care. And I often am a point of contact for a lot of residents and family members. I don't claim to know everything, but again, as Sarah said, am completely willing to hunt down an answer or point someone in the right direction so that they get their answer to whatever question may arise. In the health center and the short stay unit in a licensed area, there are a lot of Medicare regulatory compliance needs. So a larger part of what I do is making sure that the required assessments are completed. Social workers are I am trained, I think, have more expertise with assessing cognition sometimes, assessing mood. There's a lot of loss, again, as Sarah described, with the transition, so it's very appropriate and pretty common when people are feeling more down or not as engaged as they used to be. So helping people identify how they're feeling and then offering support, connecting them to resources that may help to enhance their quality of life. So as part of the Medicare regulatory compliance, we offer care conferences with the care plan team every quarter. So that's an opportunity for residents and their family members, whoever they identify as providing that support, to come together and meet with the team to go over the care plan, to make changes as identified by the resident and their family. I do a lot of advocating, and I really appreciate the social work perspective as one that complements the other disciplines, the nursing perspective. I like to challenge the nursing perspective and other team disciplines, bringing the resident voice to the table, especially if the resident is unable to do that for themselves. A lot of advanced care planning conversations and documentation occurs prior to one's admission to the health center or the licensed area. But I do a lot of reviewing those documents with family members. It's often that an individual will complete those documents on their own, but not have the conversations with the people they've identified as the ones who should be making their healthcare decisions. So it's really helpful, I think, to those who have been identified to know what are my loved ones' wishes. I know I'm the person, but I don't really know what they want. So helping to facilitate some of those conversations and reviewing the documentation that has already been completed. There's also some tools, if you will, or some documentation additional documentation that can help identify wishes for healthcare interventions at the end of one's life or in a medical crisis that are more appropriate to complete for the population of residents in the health center. The I-Post is one of those documents that may not be as appropriate for someone who's living at the independent level of care, but a good documentation to have for someone who's in the health center or the loft. Yeah, so Sarah just asked if I talk about the difference between those three locations in that licensed area. So the health center and the loft and the short stay unit are all under our 58-bed license. The short stay unit is for people who may have had a medical condition or event, fractured bone or some sort of acute event that brought them to the hospital, and the recommendation is that they receive some physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech therapy to help them get back to their prior level of function, with the goal for someone to return back to their home, wherever that may be, independent living, Oak Mill East, or assisted living. So it's really intended for a short stay. There are times when residents come with the intention of receiving that therapy and a return back to their home, but it's determined throughout that process that their healthcare needs would be better served at a different level of care, in which case there are conversations with the resident and family members about the appropriate level of care and potential need to transition into the health center. So the health center is more of our long-term living level of care under the license. The short stay unit is for a shorter stay, people who are receiving a Medicare skilled benefit. And then the loft is for residents who have a diagnosis of dementia, and they have some dementia-related behaviors that would be, someone residing in the loft would kind of decrease or hopefully decrease some of those behaviors. It's a lower stimulus unit. It's not a thoroughfare as the health center is. So it's, and the design of the loft was with the intention of providing comfort to someone with a dementia diagnosis. I think at this point we'll open it up to questions. I know we haven't touched on all of what social work does, but I don't know that we'd be able to do that.
Questions? Get my steps in.
You know how you get your exercise now.
Do you have regular hours or do you work in shifts?
Yeah, good question. So we do have regular hours. Sarah and I both are 80% employees, so yeah, 32 hours a week.
I mean, from what time in the morning to the afternoon, night?
Yeah, so we're both here just Monday through Friday. I think 8 to 3:30ish. My Fridays are a little bit early. I leave a little earlier. There's a little bit of flexing, but Monday through Friday, generally, I would say 8:30 to 3:30. Yeah.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Margaret has one.
Oh. Okay, Margaret, here we go.
I've been here 10 years and I'd like to review the decisions that I made 10 years ago about end of life. How do I do that? As to what's on file where?
Good question, Margaret, and I'm gonna take this one only because you're living in an independent apartment. Kaylee's answer would be the same. But I wanna take this because I encourage this kind of review for everyone at the independent level. You would just schedule a time to sit down with me, and maybe Stacy, the apartment nurse, and we would go through your medical chart file that we have on you. And I know you've updated those, some of that information pretty regularly over the years. But then we would just kind of do a thorough review and make sure that the decisions were still the same. The agents, the decision makers that you've chosen are still the same. And then just make sure that everyone who needs to have copies of those documents has copies of those documents. And when I say that, I mean we have copies, your physician has copies, the decision makers that you've chosen have copies, so we want to make sure that everybody who would potentially be standing at that bedside would know what your wishes were. And this is a good time to bring up in part of this review, because I really have found that a lot of residents say, oh, I did that years ago with my attorney, and haven't really seen that document since. So that can be part of the review too. If you don't know where your powers of attorney documents are, do a little investigating and see if you can track them down. We can always create new ones, and you don't need an attorney if it's real cut and dry. I can certainly help you, Kaylee can help you fill out a new power of attorney form for either healthcare or finances. We have notaries here at Oak Knoll, but again, we would want to make sure that everybody who needed to know had copies of that information. Usually there is a primary designee and then an alternate. And one thing that we've had had to do every so often is when a partner, a spouse, or a primary agent develops dementia and then is no longer able to serve in that role for you, you know, we need to make some changes. And some people choose to either recreate, just start over with a fresh power of attorney document, or we would need to get a doctor's note stating that that primary agent was unable to, you know, fulfill the obligations of the power of attorney, and it would then trigger the alternate to serve in that role. So that's just something to think about, because you know, every so often we'll catch somebody, you know, needing to make that change.
Sarah, would you encourage residents to do that review annually?
Yeah, I mean, I think annually would be fine. That's probably a robust, you know, schedule, but certainly when you or somebody in your family notices changes. So even if you don't think you see any changes, but your daughter or son says, gee, Dad, I don't know if you should be driving anymore, and you say, get the hell out of here. But, you know, I mean, just take that as a sign that maybe we should, you know, take a moment to review what we've got going on.
Just to add to that, during that review, making sure the person you've identified as your agent is willing to act on your behalf. There are certainly instances where you may have identified your adult daughter to make those decisions, and that adult daughter isn't going to be able to fulfill your wishes for whatever emotional, whatever reason. Maybe it's too emotionally difficult for your daughter to make those decisions, or maybe they don't match with your agent's wishes. So just making sure you've identified someone who is also willing to act.
Joan, I'll bring the microphone to you.
How does one know when it's time to leave independent living and go to assisted living, for example? Do you prompt that? Do we prompt it? What happens?
How does one know? Call and we, you know, invoke the spirits. I'm gonna say something really radical right now. Every single person in this room would benefit from assisted living. So I'm just, you know, there really isn't, it can't be too soon. It can be too late. That's part of the problem, is that by the time, and this is why I say listen to your children, listen to your doctor, because by the time you think you're ready, you're probably past the window of opportunity for assisted living. Just see it too many times, you know. So that's my little line. It's always going to feel like it's too soon until it's too late. And so the difference between and it's kind of hard to pin down, but what happens to people as they age? They don't just lose like one thing. You know, it's kind of a cluster of things, so that physical decline is happening as while cognitive decline is happening, and then maybe you might have a pre-existing, you know, diabetes or heart condition that is now amping up, you know, and so all of a sudden you just need more supervision. And people will often try and schedule the help in their independent apartment so they can stay longer. And for some things that works very well. But for a lot of people, they don't need 1 hour of dedicated staff presence. They need 12 5-minute times where someone is checking in, or passing a medication, or reminding them to eat, or take a shower, or come to an exercise class. So that's what assisted living offers, is this safety net and this 24-hour cycle of, you know, it's just like a little butterfly touching down. It's just little check-ins here and there that help people stay on track and oriented with their day. And, you know, so lots of times I mean, you said, how will you know? Either I do have people who say, I'm ready, it's time, and, you know, and it's appropriate. Other times we have to get involved and do a little convincing. Other times we have to, you know, your doctor might be someone who would bring it up with you, or your children. But usually it's either we're seeing more of you for whatever reason, our staff are noticing changes, family is noticing changes. There's kind of a, you know, a buildup that you can start to feel, and we call it, you know, on the radar, that puts somebody on the radar. And then, you know, as Kaylee said, there's a transition meeting that happens every Monday, and it's multidisciplinary. Steve's there, Kim Bergen's there, you know, there's a lot of people at the table, and we're just kind of talking about people who are on the radar. Most of them are already in, you know, a licensed area, but if there are some independent residents who are struggling, we kind of talk about them, and if they show up on that list week after week after week after week, then we know we've got to do something. But, you know, I mean, ideally it would all be completely, you know, whatever, you guys would all concede and trust Oak Knoll, but, you know, I mean, a lot of people dig their heels in and are resistant to that conversation, so that certainly makes it a little bit more difficult, but not impossible.
And I just want to say, and I don't have a microphone, but I think you can hear me. I just want to say that the support that's given to the families if someone's in the health center of the law, or to those of us who are independent when we're having a loved one going through different changes, has been remarkable for so many people in this room, I know. But a lot of us would have been in big trouble had you folks not been there on top of it.
That really means a lot. Yeah, because we don't, those aren't easy times for anybody. And we always want to be seen as a source of support and assistance, and kind of walking with you, companioning you and your loved ones as things change. So appreciate that.
I have something to add to that, because the people that I know that have moved in there that are very reluctant to go, every time you see them, they're so happy they're there, and some will say, I don't have a thing to do, they do everything for me. I mean, it's just that decision making, but they're so happy over there, and that's comforting to me, to know these people are happier when I have a place to go.
Yeah, so assisted living, that's kind of a classic line, but we do hear it. You know, after all this pulling of people down there, they say, well, what was the big deal? Why didn't I do this before? And so that's a very gratifying thing to hear over and over. Although I'm going to say, I know the perception is that they do everything for you. What happens with assisted living is they do the things that are very taxing. So yes, they're going to do your laundry, and yes, you get increased housekeeping, and yes, they may be, you know, organizing your medications and helping you keep track of your doctor's appointments and coordinating rides, etc., etc. But that leaves individuals more time to do the things that they really enjoy. So people are often spending a lot of their energy doing those kind of, you know, daily mundane tasks of living, that when the support for that is there, they find that they have a lot more energy for social engagement, for exercise, for, you know, those kinds of things. So really see that over and over again.
I just wanted to compliment the whole operation of Short Stay. Watching people who've been through kind of a trauma, and then giving them that little piece of time to get their act together and to talk with the right people. I think it's incredible. And it is it kind of prepares them for the other kind of deciding whether they're going to go downstairs.
Yeah.
And I just think it's just a real, I've just seen people accommodations.
Yeah, that's great.
And if I have to go someday, I'll be ready.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it really is, I mean, people really enjoy their experience in the short stay unit, and then it makes them more open to accepting other kinds of support from Oaknall, for sure.
I have one question. Right here.
I'm hearing that the assisted living is really full right now. What do you do with a person that all of a sudden needs to go there, and how do you adjust to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, don't believe everything you hear about assisted living, because it always seems like there's more, you know, I mean, the grapevine is, you know, always maybe not quite in step, but, so always verify with a trusted source, number one. Number two, so, it's kind of impossible, it's not impossible to need assisted living right away, but if you've had that dramatic of a change and you need 24-hour supervision immediately, we would probably need to send you to the short stay unit to be evaluated and assessed. Because, you know, assisted living, like I said, all of you would be perfectly appropriate and benefit from assisted living. It does require a level of independence. But, you know, that's not to say, and that's something that happens. So here's, if somebody is in that situation and they're in the short stay and they need assisted living, they absolutely cannot go back to their apartment. We have in the past just kept them in the short stay unit until something becomes available. And there are times when it has the apartment that's available isn't the ideal spot. We don't do this often. We don't have to do it very often, but there have been a couple of instances where, well, then you move them into what's available while they wait for something that's more appropriate for their needs.
I understand that.
So it's kind of a big puzzle, you know. I see Steve back there nodding his head. I mean, it can be kind of a puzzle, and it can be stressful for us because we made that promise and we want to keep it. We aim to keep, you know, there's a place for you when you need it. But there's a little bit more that goes into determining what your need is and when your need is. So sometimes a resident might think, I need it right now. Well, we need to hear that from a doctor. You know, I mean, we don't make our decisions based on our assessments of you or even your assessments of you. We base our decisions on your medical providers, and also we rely a lot on our therapists for Millennium, the physical, occupational, and speech therapists. Because they're the professionals, they can do complete assessments and then kind of guide us as to the level of care that's most appropriate and most beneficial for you. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Where moving to assisted living means substantial downsizing.
Mm-hmm.
What is Oaknall prepared to do to help with that, or how is that handled?
Yeah, so moving to assisted living requires downsizing, just like moving to Oaknall probably required downsizing for many of you. So Oaknall, I mean, your personal property is always ultimately your and your family's responsibility. But what Oaknall does as part of that process is connects you with resources. So if you need, you know, if you don't have anyone who's available to help you make decisions about, this is going to go to my apartment, this is going to be donated, this is going to be given away to my daughter. We have internal resources. There's folks at Home with Oaknall who help with those kinds of things. And then we also have external resources. I have some excellent referrals for people who do this kind of senior downsizing niche work. I mean, it's really become quite a thing. And they do a great job, and they're worth every penny. But what Oaknall does in terms of the move is, you know, when it comes time to move maintenance, the maintenance department moves everything that's been identified, that's been packed, and then you have 30 days from the day of the move then to clear the rest of the things from your independent living apartment. So that usually gives people a little bit of comfort that there's some stages to that process, that the first stage is just getting them to their new spot, getting them settled and comfortable. And then the second phase, which is, you know, usually ample time for them to make arrangements, and we help identify the resources for making arrangements to get the rest of the things cleared out.
You still have a storage unit if you go from
Yes,
independent?
yes, you would switch storage units. You know, so that's another place to downsize. If you know, take a look at what's in storage, you know, do you really use that, whatever thingamajiggy?
I don't want to go with it.
But yeah, so there is a storage unit for each apartment in assisted living. And people are usually pleasantly surprised, like, oh, that's pretty big, that's good.
So to add to that, with the transition to the health center, there isn't storage available for the health center residents, but try and reframe the focus when someone needs the health center level of care, and that's primarily on the 24/7 nursing care and support that's available. So yet another downsize and loss because the rooms are even smaller than the assisted living apartments, but the focus really is more on the care provided at that level. That being said, there is room for and some flexibility to have some personal possessions. So.
Any further questions? Okay. Great job.
Thank you all for coming.
So on behalf of the Community Connections Committee, I would like to thank you all for coming, and thank you again to the Oak Knoll social work team of Sarah Neary, and Allison Clark. And I want to say that our next scheduled program is February the 9th, and it will be our technical team. So we hope to see you in February. And I think Steve will have a comment.
I was trying to do a respectful job and not step in and add anything, because that wouldn't have been appropriate. But I do want to add this, you need to hear it. This is absolutely the best social work team that we've ever had.
Thank you all, and have a good rest of day.
Well, yeah.